XGF, who hooked up with my brother the day before our wedding, reached out to me 12 years later, a week before my wedding, but this time I need revenge. I'm 38 and getting married to my beautiful girlfriend, 35, of 4 years in less than a week. This is my second engagement. 12 years ago, I almost got married to my ex-girlfriend, 38. She was my high school sweetheart, and we'd been together for almost 10 years, and we'd even lived together for 5 years. So naturally, I was ready to get married, and from the looks of it, so was she. My family loved my ex as well, so they were thrilled when I announced the news of our engagement. But it didn't happen because just one day before the wedding, my ex ended up sleeping with my brother, 34. My ex had told me to spend the night before the wedding at a hotel while she stayed home, since she believed we'd been together for 10 years and we'd even lived together for 5, so naturally, I was ready to get married, and from the looks of it, so was she. My family loved my ex as well, so they were thrilled when I announced the news of our engagement. However, it didn't work out because, just one day before the wedding, my ex ended up sleeping with my brother, who was 34. My ex had told me to spend the night before the wedding at a hotel while she stayed home, since she believed that we needed to stay separately to avoid bad luck. I did what she asked, but unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I'd forgotten my shoes back home and had to go back for them a few hours after I reached the hotel. When I went back home, I was surprised to see that the lights were out in the living room, since my ex hated turning the lights off when she left a room and couldn't believe that she'd remembered. I went in and headed straight to the bedroom, since we had to stay separate to avoid bad luck, so I did what she asked. I forgot my shoes, so I had to go back for them a few hours after I got to the hotel. When I went back, I was surprised to see that the lights were off in the living room. My ex hated turning the lights off, so I couldn't believe that she'd remembered. I went in and headed straight to the bedroom, where I'd kept the shoebox because it was so special to me. But when I opened the door to my room, I saw the worst thing I'd ever seen. My ex was lying in bed with my little brother. They were so caught up that they barely noticed my entrance. Took a few seconds for them to notice me, and I literally froze. I had no idea how to react. That's where I'd kept the shoebox because it was so special to me. But when I opened the door to my room, I saw the worst thing I'd ever seen. My ex was lying in bed with my little brother. They were so caught up in what they were doing that they barely even noticed I was there. Took a few seconds for them to notice me, and I literally froze. I had no idea how to react. My world came crashing down, and as soon as I realized what I had just witnessed, I ran out of the room while my ex called after me. I drove back to the hotel, hyperventilating and panicking, and straight up refusing to believe what I had seen. I was supposed to get married the next day, so this was just insane. It took me a while to calm down once I got to my room. When I finally did, I ended up sobbing for at least an hour. Thank you. My world completely fell apart. As soon as I realized what I had just seen, I hightailed it out of there. My ex called out to me, but I couldn't believe what I had just seen. I was supposed to get married the next day, so this was just insane. It took me a while to calm down once I got to my room. When I finally did, I sobbed for at least an hour. I hadn't told my ex which hotel I was in, so she couldn't get to me. She could only text me, which is what she did. She sent me a bunch of apology texts and tried to convince me that this was just a one-time thing. I highly doubted that. She also said that the wedding was freaking her out, so she needed to blow off some steam. My brother had always been there for her, so she didn't know whom to turn to. I didn't believe for a second that she was trying to explain herself after what I'd seen, and I blocked her immediately. I also blocked my brother, since I wasn't interested in any of their bullshit apologies. It took me a while, but I managed to pull myself together and canceled all the wedding arrangements. First and foremost, no matter how much money I lost, I was going to get out of this mess. My ex had just wasted 10 years of my life, so I didn't mind wasting a few thousand, as long as it meant that I wouldn't have to be with her anymore. The next thing I did was call my parents and tell them what had happened. They were really confused about whether they should be consoling me or cutting my brother off, so I gave them some time to think about it. By then, it was pretty late, so I ordered myself some dinner and then cried myself to sleep. After that day, I only ever saw my ex twice. Once when she came back. She came over to pack up her things and leave, and then a couple years later, at a mutual friend's party, she tried to talk to me, but I left as soon as I saw her coming. My brother and I haven't spoken since then because my parents cut him off for what he did to me. The last I heard, he was working in Europe and hadn't come back here for 3 years. But that was all in the past, and I've moved on from that awful incident. I'm in a better place now, and I'm with a great woman I trust completely. Everything was going well until a few days ago, just 1 week before my wedding. My ex reached out to me. I don't know how she found out about me or my wedding, but she contacted me from a new Facebook account because I blocked her original account. She sent me a bunch of messages about how devastated she was to hear that I was getting married. It was strange that she reached out again, even though we almost got married. But it felt like DJVU, with her begging me to take her back, even though she'd cheated on me. She said she'd always loved me, and I was the only man she'd ever loved. It got to me, so I told my fiancée right away. I was so perturbed that I wanted to give her a piece of my mind. I felt so perturbed by this that I wanted to give her a piece of my mind for bothering me before my wedding. But another, more unforgiving part of me really wanted revenge. I knew I'd done the right thing all those years back and had dealt with the situation like an adult. But this time I wanted to mess her up so badly that she wouldn't even think of ever getting back in touch with me again. When I told my fiancée what I was feeling, she was totally on board with it as well because even though she'd been cheated on, she understood. She'd been cheated on before, and while it wasn't a 10-year relationship, it still hurt. She knew how I felt, so this time, instead of just letting it go, we came up with a plan to get revenge and make sure that my ex went through the same heartache that she put me through. This is why, a couple of hours after I received her text, I decided to text her back, saying that I was finally ready to talk to her. She told me that she was ready to come to we had a pretty long-term thing going on, but it wasn't a 10-year relationship. She knew how I felt, so this time, instead of just letting it go, we came up with a plan to get revenge and make sure that my ex went through the same heartache that she put me through. This is why, a couple of hours after I received her text, I decided to text her back, saying that I was finally ready to talk to her. She told me that she was ready to come to my place right that second, but I told her to get a room in a nearby hotel and I'd meet her there the next day, so that my fiancée wouldn't feel suspicious. Of course, my fiancée was right beside me while I was talking to her. She agreed to all of it, and so the next day, I went to her hotel at the time we'd agreed upon. She seemed overjoyed to see me and was actually crying happy tears. But she'd be crying real tears, and as she sat me down and started explaining how she was sorry about what had happened for the past 12 years and wanted to make it up to me, but didn't know how to reach me. Then she heard that I was getting married again, and she just knew she had to text me one last time or she'd lose me forever. I listened to her intently, even pretending to be interested, and held her hands while she was talking, and I was just waiting for my fiancé to show up. Almost 20 minutes later, there was a knock on the door, and I rushed to open it. My fiancé came in, followed by all our groomsmen and bridesmaids. They were wearing masks of my brother's face, and they even brought a cake. My brother's face was smiling at us from the cake. My ex was horrified and couldn't even say anything. She was shocked, and I could see it on her face. I guess nobody would have guessed this would happen. We convinced the hotel staff that we were just dropping by, and it was easy since she'd already told them to let anyone in who wanted to see her. She meant just for me, but I had other plans. After she could understand what was going on, she started sobbing and mumbling some nonsense while crying. I guess I was pretty shocked too. I'm not gonna let her off that easily. She had the nerve to message me just a week before my wedding, even after cheating on me with my own brother the day before we were supposed to get married. Now, she's got to face the consequences of her actions. I told her that this was what she deserved and that if she thought she ever had a chance with me after cheating on me, she was dead wrong. She had no business texting me after what she did. Dee put me through, and I was glad that she was hurt by what I'd done because she'd brought it upon herself. I was really cold and short while saying all of this, but she continued to sob and said that if I didn't want her back, then I should have just ignored and blocked her instead of going out of my way to humiliate her this way. But I didn't feel sorry for her in the slightest. Not then and not now. I told her never to speak to me again. I told her never to speak to me again and left her crying in the hotel room. Now, I'm supposed to get married in 2 days, but some of my fiancé's friends want me to apologize to my ex because they think the way I told her off that day was harsh. They think no matter what she did, she didn't deserve this. My groomsmen don't share this sentiment since they've known me since middle school, and they're also well aware of how I've had to battle depression and fight for my life in the years following my breakup with my ex because of what had happened. They also knew how much I loved her and what she'd meant to me, so they didn't mind what I'd done. My fiancé's friends had probably been expecting some high school drama that they could gossip about later, but this was too raw and real for them. My fiancé is on my side and doesn't think I should apologize, but her friends are. They're not going to be part of the wedding if I don't apologize, and I'm really torn up about it. I don't want my fiancée to be upset on our wedding day, and she really values her friends, but I also don't think I owe my ex any apology. She could have just stayed out of my life, and this never would have happened, but she just didn't want to see me happy. In fact, she's still trying to play the victim. She keeps sending me texts from spam accounts about how I broke her heart and that this will definitely come back to me someday. I don't like this kind of emotional manipulation. Not for my ex and definitely not for my fiancé's bridesmaids. I know she'll never tell me to apologize just for her sake, but I sort of feel obliged to at this point, and that's why I'm here. I'm running out of time, and I've got to figure out what to do. I'm thinking of confronting my ex, who cheated on me, after she tried to get back with me just a week before my wedding. People have really different responses to this, to say the least. There's just one day left before the wedding, and I've decided to talk to my fiancée before I do anything, like most people said I should. I talked to her about how I'd been feeling, and as soon as I told her, she said I didn't owe an apology to my ex just because her bridesmaids thought so. If they were offended, they could skip her wedding. She said her bridesmaids had no idea what had happened, and most of them thought I'd overreacted. Even after she explained that my ex and I had been together for a decade and cheated on me with my brother, things that are incomprehensibly cruel and don't deserve to, I was forgiven, but they weren't convinced. They still think I was being unreasonable and that I owed her an apology. So she gave up trying to explain my side of things to them. She even told them that they didn't have to attend our wedding if they didn't want to. She hasn't spoken to her friends in a whole day. It seems really unlikely that they'll be attending. One of them even paid her back for the cost of the bridesmaid dress that I bought them all, and she thinks most of them are going to skip. She's putting up a strong front for my sake. But I know she's hurting because these women have been her friends since high school. My fiancée says she doesn't care, but I know she does deep down. So, I've decided to talk to her friends and try to convince them myself. As for my ex, well, she's still being a total pain. A few hours ago, she managed to call me and then she spent 15 whole minutes trying to argue with me, trying to convince me that I was still in love with her, but was just too proud to admit it. Why would she say that? Well, apparently it's because I went to such lengths just to humiliate her, so it obviously meant that I still had feelings for her deep down. Yeah, she's right, but those feelings are of hate and disgust. For whatever reason, she believes that I just wanted to see her one last time, which is why I held her hands while she was talking. But honestly, that was just to shock her even more. I literally laughed in her face while talking to her, hoping that she'd get the hint. But she kept on blabbering about how we were soulmates and that I needed to call off the wedding before I made a huge mistake. Honestly, the only reason I'm even entertaining any of this is so that she doesn't end up doing anything stupid. I'm trying to get her parents to take her away, but I haven't heard back from them yet. I'm just waiting for them to respond. Once they do, I'll finally be able to get rid of her once and for all. I still hate her, but I don't want her to hurt herself. I'm not that cruel. By the way, guys, I'm married now. It's been a couple of days since the ceremony. I'm still in disbelief. She's now my wife and I'm thrilled. Unfortunately, there's some sad news. Her friends didn't show up to the wedding, even though I tried to get them to come. I personally called each of them to explain why I'd done what I'd done and why I didn't want to apologize, but they weren't too interested. Even when I asked them to attend just for my wife's sake, they weren't too keen. I was on it, and it just seemed bizarre to me because I'd surely attend a friend's wedding, even if I didn't particularly like the person they were getting married to. I only learned the real reason yesterday when my wife finally confessed that she'd had a feeling her friends wouldn't attend, regardless of whether or not I apologized. She refused to do what they'd asked of her and had disagreed with them. They didn't like that one bit and believed that they were all one unit, so they always needed to have a united front. These were her friends from high school, and while she'd managed to keep them throughout the years because they never really had anything important to disagree upon, this was the first time their friendship was tested. She chose me over her friends, which they didn't like at all. She said she was a little upset about it, but was too embarrassed to admit it because it was all so juvenile. I was cool with it, though. At least now I knew it wasn't really my fault, and her friends were just self-centered. My wife even said that part of her was glad they didn't go to the wedding because she could finally stop trying to fit in and live life on her own terms without constantly having to seek her friends' approval. So that was good for us, I guess. Also, my ex's parents finally got back to me the night before my wedding. I explained to them quickly what their daughter had tried to do, and how they needed to get to the hotel she'd been staying in to take her back with them for her own safety. She was acting psychotic and delusional, and I didn't think it was okay for her to be on her own. As it turns out, they'd been on a hiking trip where they had no network, but now that they were back, they promised me they'd come to take her back. They thanked me for letting them know, and I haven't heard from them since. I'm guessing they got her back home safely. Hey guys, it's been a week since my wedding, and unfortunately, it's been nothing but drama so far. As I mentioned, my girlfriend or her parents haven't been in touch with me since the last time I spoke to her parents. I assumed they'd take her home, but apparently not. 2 nights ago, there was a knock at the door, and since it was really late, my wife and I had no idea who it could be because we weren't expecting anyone. I made a mistake by opening the door before checking the cameras. When I opened the door, my ex pushed past me and walked in with her bags. My wife was sitting on the couch and literally sprang to her feet as soon as my ex walked in. I was about to ask her what she was doing in my house, but before I could say anything, she told me she was here to stay. A few days ago, her parents came to bring her home, but she refused to go because she knew I'd take her back soon. My wife and I were stunned and had no idea how to react because it all seemed so crazy. She told me her parents tried to force her to go back with them, but she had a huge fight with them and ended up staying at the hotel. Now she's running. She's broke, so she's moving in with me. She figured that if I spent time with her, I'd get reminded of the past and fall back in love. I was totally clueless how to react, since this was so bizarre. My wife tried to talk to her, but she ignored her and kept talking to me, demanding that I let her move in. I gently told her that she's married now, so she can't just show up here and move in. But she said she didn't see the wedding as an official event, so she didn't think I was married. I couldn't believe it, but I didn't want to kick her out because she seemed unstable. She needed help, so I told her to wait in the living room while I went to talk to my wife in the bedroom. Next, I'm thankful my wife was also pretty understanding and realized something was off about how my ex was acting. She needed serious professional help, and we realized it. I tried to get through to her parents, but they didn't accept my calls and texted back saying they couldn't force her to come back anymore. They said she was too psychotic to live with them, so she was on her own. They were clearly embarrassed of her, and it was shameful how they just gave up on their daughter when they realized she was going through something and there was nothing else they could do. I decided to call my parents, and they showed up within half an hour. My ex had fallen asleep on the couch in the meantime, which was really lucky. When my parents arrived, we decided to take her to a therapist as soon as possible because there was no telling what she was capable of doing at this point. My wife and I let her stay that night because, honestly, neither of us could bring ourselves to hate her anymore. The whole situation was really sad, and it was clear that something had happened to her. She needed to be treated ASAP, and her parents weren't around to help her. My parents and I took her to the hospital the next day. She was rambling about how glad she was that I was finally coming around, and she even started planning our wedding. We took her to see a mental health professional, but she refused, saying she felt perfectly fine. After a lot of struggle and complications, the doctors managed to calm her down with some meds and administered some drugs to her that I don't remember the names of. After that, she seemed significantly calmer, and 1 or 2 hours later, she finally said that she wanted to go home. I brought her home, and we let her rest in a room while my family and I sat in the living room thinking about what to do next. My wife and I were really relieved when she said that. She wanted to go home now, and she even helped us pack her things into the trunk of our car. We drove her home together, and she didn't say a word the whole time. Neither did we, because what could we say? Once she got home, she apologized to both of us for the trouble she caused and said that she was ashamed of everything that had happened. My wife and I felt pretty awkward during this whole thing, but we told her it was all right. She wanted to go home, so we drove her there together. She didn't say much on the way, and neither did we. What could we say? When she got home, she apologized to both of us for the trouble she caused and said she was ashamed of what had happened. My wife and I felt pretty awkward, but we told her it was all right and advised her to take care of herself before driving back home. I'm not sure if it would help, but I did contact my ex's mother and fill her in on everything that had happened. I guess that finally made them realize how serious the situation was. She told me she's moved in with her daughter and said she'll keep us updated. Despite everything that has happened so far, my wife and I truly wish that she gets better.